Good morning. This is Yin Yang in California with Morsels of a Thought number 1898. We are reading from Cavin Balaster's book, How to Feed a Brain, Nutrition for Optimal Brain Function and Repair. We're reading chapter 8 today. I will read the entire chapter, I think, and, okay. So this is the ins, hydration and macronutrients. Chapter 8, hydration. For any of the benefits that we have talked about so far to be effective, it is very important for us to be sure to supply adequate hydration. We are all aware that we need to be hydrated to live, but another very important function of hydration is to help us to move toxins out of our bodies. So we want to supply more than just enough to survive. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to you can't see me at the moment, but only because I am trying to remove the sound that we get from my not having the phone prepared. Okay, so there we are. And back to you. All right, we're back. 20 seconds of blank space. I'm sorry about that. The amount of water that we consider to be optimal is dependent on many factors, including how much water is in the foods we eat. If we are supplying nutrition via a gastric tube, we may want to work with a qualified healthcare professional to determine this amount. But for healthy adults, we can generally divide our weight in pounds by 2 and use that number to determine how many ounces of water to drink each day as a minimum requirement. So, if you weigh about 160 pounds like me, you would divide that number by 2 and know to drink at least 80 ounces of water. Using a different method of measurement, since there are 30 ounces in a liter, about 2 pounds in a kilogram, we can divide our weight in kilograms by 30 to determine how many liters to drink. If you weigh about 72.5 kilograms like me, you would divide that number by 30 and know to drink at least 2.4 liters of water a day. Again, this is a guideline for a minimum requirement. I tend to drink much more than the minimum requirement of 80 ounces and consume more like 140 ounces of water per day. This converts to about 4 liters per day, which is far more than my required 2.4 liters. It is important that we do not supply too much or too little water, overhydrate or underhydrate, yet there is quite a bit of wiggle room for us. I absolutely love a certain water bottle that is entirely spill-proof and doesn't need to have the top opened in order to drink from it. Because the bottle is itself so convenient, I end up drinking more water. A simple purchase like that can ensure we are properly hydrated and improve our health dramatically. You can see this product and more information about hydration at feedabrain.com/hydration. For nurses and dietitians, there is a good article concerning hydration management that was published in Nursing Times, maintaining hydration in enteral tube feeding, and maintaining hydration in enteral tube feeding. You can find this article and other important information at feedabrain.com/hydration. Keep in mind that needs may increase based on physical activity, climate, or other medical needs, so work with a qualified healthcare provider. Depending on the amount of salt, bone broth may also count toward your hydration, meaning that a cup of unsalted bone broth can potentially be counted as a cup of water. Bone broth contains proteins as well. Macronutrients. Macronutrients are broken down into 3 main categories: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. While most of us can rely on our appetite to guide our protein requirements, these requirements can vary significantly depending on the stage of recovery. Additionally, a patient may be unable to communicate or could potentially have damaged areas to his or her brain that affect appetite. Work with your dietitian to determine requirements, especially for patients who cannot communicate or perceive their appetite. Again, my desire to help is immense. To help navigate these issues, I offer one on one consultations at feedabrain.com/consult, and we are also working on courses and other resources that will be offered at feedabrain.com/education. This book will provide some general guidelines and formulas that can be used to estimate amounts of required macronutrients, but keep in mind that these are only estimates of average needs for a healthy individual, and those in critical care can rarely be considered to have a normal metabolism. Jeremy Lampel, Lampel, MSRD, CDE, has shared with us a handout which he uses to inform his patients of how the macronutrients of their diets might be distributed for different conditions. It is advised you bring these guidelines to your dietitian or other qualified healthcare provider. For your convenience, all charts can be found as printable, full-size, color PDF files at feedabrain.com/handouts. So he's got carbohydrates and fat and protein listed on this chart. And each of them has a lot of descriptions, the goal, the population, uh, health conditions, macronutrient ratios, health conditions, age, gender, and lifestyle determine how much of each macronutrient should be consumed per day. Okay, so there's more. The ketogenic and low carb ratios provided here are typically appropriate for neurological conditions. The amounts provided in grams are guidelines for healthy average sized men and women. So there is a lot of percentages, proteins grams for men and protein grams for women. The weight loss, blood sugar, sugar problems, adding muscle mass. They expect you to have more protein when you're trying to do weight loss. It sounds like. And ketogenic, low carb, moderate carb, high carb. And they've got different numbers of carbs and grams for men and grams for women. Okay, and fat. They've got fat. Protein. Dr. Harry Walls says that adults need at least 6 ounces, 170 grams of animal meat per day, and preferably closer to 12 ounces, 340 grams, but up to 21 ounces, 595 grams per day. General macronutrient guidelines tend to be measured as grams of the macronutrient protein, but not grams of a protein containing food like meat. An 8 ounces serving of beef, for example, weighs about 227 grams, but it only contains 61 grams of actual protein. This becomes confusing when measuring actual food, so we might instead use this guideline as a ballpark. 0.06 to 0.09 ounces of meat per pound of body weight, 3.69 grams to 5.67 grams of meat per kilogram of body weight. So if you, like me, weigh about 160 pounds, about 72 kilograms, then we aim for 9.6 ounces to 14.4 ounces, 272 grams to 408 grams of meat per day. But what does that look like? Let's simplify even further and measure using the size of our fists. The size of my hand formed into a closed fist is close to the size of 6 to 8 ounce steak, 170 to 227 grams. So this is the guideline that I like to use. We want to eat more than one, but up to 3 fist-sized pieces of meat per day. You may use these formulas as a ballpark, but again, we encourage you to work with a dietitian, nutritionist, or physician. Carbohydrates. Now that we can see how much produce we want to be eating, let's strategize how we are going to supply these foods every day. Some of us may be able to get pre-made meals from feedabrain.com/pre-made, or we can prepare our food ahead of time to get the benefits of convenience combined with excellent nutrition. Batch cooking, meal prep, or bulk cooking is when we prepare most or all of our meals and snacks for the entire week on one day. We are all very busy with so many things in our lives that food can move way down on our priority list, especially in the face of difficulty. With our busy schedules, we often end up eating a lot of foods that we should have little room for when eating the 6 to 9 fists of brain building produce. But the information contained in this book should really bring the power of the right kind of nutrition to the forefront. Brain nutrition is made so much easier by having meals organized and ready made, and batch cooking can actually be a fun family activity. Throughout the beginning stages of changing my diet, when I was hungry, which was almost always, we're getting close to the end of this section here, I was incredibly tempted to eat whatever was available at that moment. My mother and I were dealing with immense pressure, pain, loss, and other stressors. We had far too much happening to be able to cook each meal, let alone to think about what those meals might be. As we became more in touch with the healing power of the right nutrition, it became clear that we needed to have these brain healing foods on hand. Getting these nutrients realistically. My mother and I would batch cook on Sunday when I didn't have therapy. We would go shopping and get roughly equal amounts of sulfur rich and colored produce for roasting. Some of my favorite colored and sulfur rich produce for roasting are listed in the batch cooking handout on the next page. My mother and I would then chop these into roughly inch-sized cubes or similar-sized pieces or slices. These would be arranged in a large, oven-safe roasting pan. We would add a healthy oil with a smoke point higher than 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 232 degrees Celsius, like avocado or olive oil, salt and pepper to taste, and then roast for 30 to 60 minutes. Afterward, we would pack these roasted veggies in Tupperware and store them in the fridge. For your convenience, all charts can be found as printable, full-size color PDF files at feedabrain.com/handouts. I think I'm going to stop right here. And next time we'll go into the roasted veggies and oh, it's only 2 more pages. Shall we? I guess we ought to. We might as well. I guess we might as well. Okay, so he's got batch cooking here. And this is for roasted veggies. He's got this in color on his website. So he's got brightly colored produce, time to get your batch on, where to store them, and gastric feed instructions adapted from the Walls Protocol by Terry Walls and Eve Adamson. Walls is spelled Wahls. Copyright 2014 by Dr. Terry Walls, LLC. Used by permission of Avery, an imprint of Penguin Publishing Group, a division of Penguin Random House, Penguin Random House LLC. With these veggies, I could easily and accessibly have brain building food at any point by simply adding them to leafy greens to make a salad. My mother and I would get a large container of pre-washed mixed greens, spinach, or arugula, or leafy greens were always so leafy greens were always available. When making salads, I could add these roasted veggies along with meats, sauerkraut, or other fermented foods. And even healthy fat like olive oil, macadamia nut oil, or almond oil. Smoke point is not important when we are not heating the oil. My mother and I tried to always pre-pack salads when we would be out all day so that I would never need to rely on convenience foods that were not part of the ins of this meal plan. I would even throw these roasted veggies into a bowl with some bone broth and then add meats, fresh herbs, cilantro, basil, or parsley, and or greens and spices. This made for several possibilities for soups that contained so many of the ingredients our brains crave. By always having brain building foods on hand, any reservation that I any reservations that I had towards preparing these meals began to fade. Once we became accustomed to making a small time commitment and gathering the foods we needed in a single trip, we were able to manage the other important aspects of recovery without the added stress of finding the foods that would benefit our efforts. It was admittedly tricky to find these vegetables at first. I had never knowingly tried some of them. After becoming familiar with some of these ingredients, the act of cutting them up, roasting them, and then packing them into containers was completely worthwhile. I now had a reliable strategy to supply the nutrients needed to rebuild the connections in my brain. Now, gastric feed information is in this box here. We can use these batch cooked veggies to create soups that may be blended in a high quality blender like BlendTech or Vitamix to make purees for gastric feeding. Add roasted veggies, meats, fresh herbs, healthy fats, and leafy greens to the blender pitcher. Fill with bone broth. Puree on high until smooth. Let cool and feed through a gastric tube. See the gastric tube feed creation instructions available at feedabrain.com/handouts. Okay, now we talk about fats. This section is going to be short because there is no real hard and fast measurement for the amount of fat that this meal plan outlines. Instead, we can stay within the carb and protein levels outlined and get the rest of our calories from the good fats outlined. This could make our fat consumption as high as 80 to 85% of calories on a ketogenic, low carbohydrate, low moderate protein diet. See the macronutrient ratios handout. The Feed a Brain guidelines are certainly, capital F, capital B, are certainly, quote, fat forward, end quote, or pro fat. So don't be shy with your intake of the brain supportive fats and oils. See the guide to fats and oils handout. As an example of the quality of fat I like to get in addition to a salad with all three types of produce, plenty of meat, and at least a tablespoon of a brain supportive oil. I also often start my day with a morning beverage that contains at least a tablespoon of brain supportive fat like ghee. The Golden Globe latte recipe in this book is an example of one of these fat forward morning beverages. If you do well with coffee in the morning, I usually don't, make your coffee with butter if well tolerated, ghee, coconut oil, MCT oil, or other brain supportive fats, which can all be found at feedabrain.com/fat. Doing so is a very appropriate addition to a high protein, low carb breakfast. Wow. That was chapter 8. We got the entire chapter down. And next week we will read chapter 9, the ins, nutrients for synaptogenesis. What a word. So here we go. I hope you have a great day. I hope this inspires you to feed a brain properly or at least know what not to eat. And says the woman who ate some Chinese candies in large quantities. Okay. Anyway, all right. I'll talk to you later. Have a great day. Old Kinderhook.